Hello and welcome to the Vaults of Terra. My name is Ed and today we're going to be looking at our final Space Marines chapters video on the Dark Angels by having a look at two of their unique formations within this chapter, the Deathwing and the Ravenwing. Now, I've mentioned these both before, but I thought they could use a brief overview because they are a little bit different from the other companies of the Dark Angels. It's worth seeing how these formations are unique to the Dark Angels and not Codex Astartes. So the Deathwing are the first company of the Dark Angels, and they're the easiest to explain. So every subsequent founding of the Dark Angels has a Deathwing style company in their ranks, and these are all based on the Deathwing that exists in the Dark Angels. Now the Deathwing is an honoured position alongside being part of their rank, being in the first company, because it allows them to enter the inner council and know the darkest secrets of the Dark Angels and their past. This means they are the most trusted of all the Marines within the chapter, and so are very well trusted. Now the current chapter master of the Deathwing at this moment is Belial. What's unique about the Deathwing is that every single member is armed with tactical dreadnought armour or Terminator armour. Now in most Codex Astartes chapters, most first companies will not be completely armed with Terminator armour. They will usually go with the armour that they require, such as the Blood Angels use assault armour and some use tactical armour when needed. However, the Deathwing exclusively use Terminator armour. Now I'm going to move on to talk about the colour of their armour. Now I've already mentioned the fact that the Deathwing is renowned for having bone white armour, which is unique among the other green and black colour schemes of the Dark Angels. Now newly initiated Dark Angels are told the story that the armour is painted bone white in reflection of when the Dark Angels went back to their recruiting planet only to find it infested with gene stealers, and so they purged the planet and painted their armour bone white in remembrance of the task that they had to perform and the fact that it was so great that they could die performing it. Now when the Dark Angel rises through the ranks, he eventually learns that this is actually the story called The Tale of Two Heads Talking. Now this is actually a false tale and is used to inspire the Dark Angels against enemies who would infiltrate the homeworld of a chapter and force them to destroy it, or at least purge it utterly. This of course makes them more accepting when the actual reason for the Deathwing is made clear to them, that they are the hunters of the fallen and their bone white armour actually signifies that fact. Now I want to move on to talk about a different company, which is the Ravenwing, which is the second company of the Dark Angels. Now, as I've mentioned, they are not part of the Codex Astartes organisation, because the entire company is mounted. Now what this means is that they all either ride bikes or land speeders into battle, utilising them in order to bring the fight to the enemy. Now the highest ranking members of the Ravenwing are the Black Knights, who are actually members of the Inner Circle and are aware of the Fallen. The rest of the Ravenwing is not aware of the Fallen. They are aware of traitor Space Marines, which many of their non-Ravenwing brethren have very little knowledge of. Now the Ravenwing, ostensibly, has to hunt down these traitor Space Marines and purge them, little knowing that many of them are hunting down the Fallen, who journey across many worlds, hidden and in secret. The current chapter master of the Ravenwing is Samael, a well-respected master in the Dark Angels, and is currently known to ride the last surviving Imperial jet bike that is known to the wider Imperium. It's unknown if other chapters have them stored somewhere or if there are any left on Terra for the Adeptus Custodes to use, but at this moment all we know is that the Ravenwing has one of the last surviving working piece of this technology. As I've mentioned before, they are highly specialised in the Ravenwing, and they ride into battle on their bikes, using them to great effect. They will not even get off their bikes when they're going into cities or building fighting, usually using their bikes to great effect in these tight spaces, despite the fact you'd expect them to be trapped and killed quite easily. Now of course they can't go every moment on the battlefield on their bikes, sometimes they do have to get off, however it's not considered a good fortune to kill without their steed, as they call it. Now of course, if their steed is ever destroyed, it is a great dishonour for the Ravenwing, and every bike in the Ravenwing may have served longer than some of the brothers who ride them, each having their own history, much like the power armour that a Space Marine wears. Now, not only using bikes and attack bikes, of course, they actually use land speeders. Now, on top of the land speeders that I mentioned in my Space Marines Armoury video, there are the land speeders Vengeance and Dark Shroud, both of which are unique to the Dark Angels chapter. The Vengeance using a type of plasma weapon to cause great destruction, and the Dark Shroud using specialist technology and actual statues from the Tower of Angels on Caliban to actually create a form of force field that protects their vehicles from enemy fire, allowing the Ravenwing to proceed without fearing the enemy. Now, the Ravenwing also has access to much of the chapter's air support vehicles, chiefly on top of the usual vehicles, employing Dark Talons, which are close support air units, which have stasis crypts in them for transporting the Fallen, and Nephilim jet fighters, which are air superiority fighters used to protect the Ravenwing who are fighting on the ground from any intruders coming into their airspace. Now, of course, their armour is different again from the Dark Angels, being painted jet black, this signifying at least their remembrance of the old ways of the chapter, because this formation did exist prior to the Fallen, being an honorary position for Dark Angels, reminding them of the orders they used to serve in on Caliban, heroic figures who used to ride through a forest dressed in all black armour. Now, there are other subformations within the Ravenwing, such as Ravenwing Command Squads and Ravenwing Black Knights, most of whom are hardened veterans of the Ravenwing and who have access to the Second Company's inner circle. Now, an interesting side note, in the year 666 of Millennium 38, 3 successive Grand Masters of the Ravenwing were actually lost in a single year while hunting the Fallen, and this led to an unprecedented 2-decade period where the Ravenwing had no Grand Master of its own, and thus had to use the Master of the Angels of Vengeance, a subsequent founding chapter, as their commander, until a suitable replacement could be trained and found. Now, this indicates another thing about the Dark Angels, which is what I'm going to go on to briefly now, which is about the fact that the Dark Angels have several subsequent founding chapters. Now, these are all split up during the reorganisation of the Space Marines at the end of the Horus Heresy, and in the subsequent years after the Horus Heresy. And now, these collective chapters all call themselves the Unforgiven, and in fact, they actually support each other a great deal. In fact, so much so that apart from having different name and different chapter colours, they are essentially the same Space Marine Legion still, operating to hunt down the Fallen and support one another in times of need, as with when the Ravenwing was without a master. So it indicates that if you ever are on a battlefield with lots of different chapters from the Dark Angels, there's a high probability that there is a Fallen about somewhere and they are looking for it. So, that's everything I wanted to mention on the unique companies in the Dark Angels, and also everything I wanted to mention on the Dark Angels themselves. So we've basically covered everything now. We will not be going into specific characters, that will wait until we do our characters highlight at the end of our roll of videos. So you know what that means, it's time for another Space Marine chapter. So, do vote in the comments below, it's your last chance to vote with us before we start our next chapter. It's currently looking like it's between the Legion of the Damned, the Imperial Fists, and the Blood Ravens. I'm sure I've missed a few, but those look like the highest contenders at the moment, so do vote in the comments below if you want one of those to succeed, or if you want a completely different chapter to succeed, and as always I will get to giving them a full video. So that's everything I wanted to mention today. See you next time on the Vaults of Terra.